Chapter 6. Here we look at cellular respiration, the cellular processes that obtain energy from the food we eat. So let's look at energy flow and a bit on chemical cycling in the earth or the biosphere. So life does require energy, as we mentioned last chapter, for movement, for growth, for many processes that are occurring at the cellular level, but then all the way up to the organism. Energy is required. And on most ecosystems on the planet, and that means the places where organisms live in their environment, the energy originates from the sun, first picked up by the photosynthetic organisms that produce carbohydrates, sugars. So photosynthesis, plants and other photosynthetic organisms convert this energy, sunlight energy, into the chemical energy of the carbohydrates they produce, and then they're able to convert those carbohydrates or sugars into the other organic molecules, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids, everything the plants need to grow, with water absorbed from the roots and some minerals from the soil. So then animals evolved, and they are dependent on the food produced by photosynthesis by the photosynthetic organisms. And that's directly for the animals that are herbivores, the ones that eat plants, and then indirectly for the animals that eat other animals, the predatory carnivores. So let's look at the producers, photosynthetic organisms, and then those organisms that consume them, the consumers. So plants and other autotrophs. Auto means self. Troph refers to feeding or nutrients. So if you're an autotroph, you produce and feed yourself, like the photosynthetic organisms, plants, for example. They make their own organic matter, carbohydrates initially from photosynthesis, and then they can make the other biological molecules from those starting carbohydrate molecules. Really pretty amazing. And they make these organic molecules from inorganic molecules, inorganic nutrients. So if you remember the organic material, the organic molecules are made up of carbon-based molecules. The inorganic ones are not. Like, say, carbon dioxide or oxygen are inorganic molecules. So these would be the starting material for photosynthesis for the producers. Carbon dioxide that's found in the atmosphere or in water, and then certain minerals that would be obtained from either in the water or from the soil. These are the starting materials or the substrates for photosynthesis. Now, heterotrophs, hetero means different, so these are organisms that have to obtain their nutrients by eating other things. So like animals, for example. They cannot make these organic molecules from inorganic molecules. The heterotroph, the consumers, have to consume, ingest, eat organic material, either from plants or from other animals, if you're a predator, for example. Over here, mosses and ferns and kelp, which is a type of protist, and euglena, which is another type of protist. These are all autotrophs. They're photosynthetic organisms. And notice the color, green, greenish gold. So most ecosystems depend on photosynthesis for food. And by the way, these are green, greenish gold because this greenish color is the color of the molecules, the pigments that absorb sunlight energy. That's why most plants, at least the part that photosynthesize, are green. So plants and other autotrophs are the producers in an environment or in an ecosystem. They're the ones that are producing food for themselves and also for consumers. So the heterotrophs are the consumers. They obtain food by eating plants or eating animals that eat plants. So let's look at chemical cycling and the processes between photosynthesis and cellular respiration. So the chemical ingredients for photosynthesis, the starting materials, are carbon dioxide, and if we're a terrestrial, land-based photosynthetic organism, like a plant, that CO2, carbon dioxide, is found in the atmosphere. Water from the soil, drawn up by the roots. The sunlight energy enters into the photosynthetic structures, the leaves, well, technically they're organs, but into the leaves, hitting the photosynthetic organelle, chloroplasts. The sunlight energy is utilized to convert inorganic molecules, water, carbon dioxide, into carbohydrates. So that hexagon shape, should be familiar with that now. That's a typical little shape for a monosaccharide, a simple sugar like glucose, and also the waste product oxygen. These are the products of photosynthesis. Okay, so in chloroplasts, the sunlight energy is used to produce these sugars, and then the plant, the photosynthetic organism, can convert the carbohydrates into the other organic biological molecules as needed. Byproduct, oxygen gas released into the atmosphere. So that's the short version of how photosynthesis works. So now animals and plants themselves will use the products of photosynthesis through cellular respiration to produce sources of energy, specifically ATP. So the other important organelle here is mitochondria, which are found in plants, and animals. So the plants can break down the carbohydrates that they produce themselves to produce ATP energy with some release of heat, and then the ATP is used to drive cellular processes within the plant. Waste products, water, carbon dioxide. So plants in a way are their own self-contained system. Consumers, whether they're herbivores eating plants or predators that eat animals that eat plants, these guys ingest food and focus on carbohydrates. They break them down, cellular respiration, same way as plants do, to convert that energy from the chemical bonds in carbohydrates into the chemical bonds in ATP, producing the energy to drive cellular work with heat released as a byproduct. And their waste products are water and carbon dioxide, which are now available for photosynthesis. So these materials cycle back and forth. Okay, so cellular respiration harvests the energy stored in carbohydrates and other organic molecules to transfer that energy onto ATP. All right. Now, photosynthesis only occurs in photosynthetic organisms like plants. Cellular respiration occurs in plants, photosynthetic organisms, and in the heterotrophs, the consumers as well. And then cells use ATP for their cellular work. Excuse me. Okay, and then the ATP is produced in the organelles called mitochondria. And then the organelles called chloroplasts are the organelles that produce the carbohydrates initially through photosynthesis. And then the waste products for cellular respiration, carbon dioxide and water, are then the ingredients readily available for photosynthesis, and the cycle continues. All right. So again, plants can do both. Convert sunlight energy through photosynthesis into carbohydrates, break down those carbohydrates through cellular respiration to produce ATP. And then excess photosynthetic product like carbohydrates that are produced, plants use that for growth and storage, energy storage. Like, say, example would be, say, potatoes that plants store in their roots full of starch, which is a polysaccharide. Animals can take advantage of that by eating potatoes, but the potatoes are produced by potato plants for energy storage. Okay, let's look at cellular respiration via oxygen utilized. Here's the oxygen to break down carbohydrates to maximize ATP production via cellular respiration at the cellular level. So aerobic means oxygen. So the aerobic harvesting of the chemical energy and the chemical bonds of carbohydrates, is utilized through the multi-step process of cellular respiration at the cellular level to make ATP, and the waste material is carbon dioxide and oxygen. Sorry, that's water. So our animals breathe in oxygen, respiratory system, oxygen gets moved into the bloodstream, cardiovascular system, oxygen reaches the cells along with carbohydrates like glucose. Within the cells, cellular respiration breaks down things like glucose. Efficiently, the energy released is put onto ATP, the waste material, carbon dioxide and water. The carbon dioxide gets back into the bloodstream, excuse me, carried to the lungs, and then you breathe it out. Any excess water at the cellular level leaves the cells. Your urinary system deals with it. The water that's required within the cells stays in the cells for needs at the cellular level. Right? And by the way, look at the math. Each glucose molecule can produce approximately 32 ATP molecules. Right? Cells take in the oxygen and release carbon dioxide. So let's look at an overview of the cellular respiration process. So within the cells, whether they're animal or plant cells, here in gray outlined is the mitochondrion, a singular for mitochondria. It's a double membraned organelle. Has an outer membrane and the inner membrane that's all convoluted to increase surface area so that there's plenty of room for the processes of cellular respiration to occur. So there's many steps involved, and each step has a specific enzyme to catalyze each specific reaction. If you remember, enzymes are special proteins that speed up chemical reactions. A catalyst is something that speeds up a chemical reaction. And every step of the way, there's many enzymes that are helping the chemical reactions occur quickly, so that during cellular respiration, we quickly produce ATP. So there's 3 basic stages of cellular respiration. Within the cell, just outside of the mitochondria, glycolysis occurs. And this is basically the breaking apart of the glucose molecule. So glyco for glucose, lysis for breaking apart. The second step occurs inside the mitochondria, and that's called the citric acid cycle because it's a cyclical process. And then lastly, the third step is called the electron transport chain, or just electron transport. Notice the size of the ATP symbol here. Most of the ATP is produced in the third step, the electron transport chain. There's a little bit of ATP produced in step 1, glycolysis, and in step 2, the citric acid cycle. And the electron transport chain is also occurring inside the mitochondria. So a little video on this, and then we'll talk about the details that you need to know.
As this mountain biker heads up the trail, the breakfast he ate this morning is being burned to power his bike ride. His breathing rate increases as his leg muscles demand more oxygen to burn more fuel. Let's zoom down to where this fuel is burned, our cells. Here, the blood vessel on the left delivers fuel and oxygen to a single muscle cell. In cellular respiration, energy and fuel is converted to ATP.
And the fuel is glucose, blood sugar,
shown here as starbursts. Most ATP is made in the cell's mitochondria. ATP powers the work of the cell, such as contraction. Let's take a closer look at how ATP is produced from a molecule of glucose, our fuel. Only the carbon skeleton is shown to keep things simple. The first step is called glycolysis, and it takes place outside the mitochondria. To begin the process, some energy has to be invested. Next, the molecule is split in half. Now, the molecule NAD+, an electron carrier, picks up electrons and hydrogen atoms from the carbon molecule, becoming NADH.